Hello, and welcome to the Venue Coach Blueprint for Owners. I'm Kyle Labar. This podcast is all about helping you fill your wedding venue with more bookings, earn more from each one, and keep your customers happy for a long time. We'll also talk about some tough times and big lessons that I've learned along the way. Let's dive in together and make your venue the best spot for weddings. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Venue Coach. And today's episode, I want to do a shout out to new venue owners and just give a little bit of helpful advice on what to expect as far as financial planning, budgeting, that sort of thing. And this is coming from experience of having my two venues and starting from nothing on one and starting from decent amount of bookings from the other, and what to expect in terms of expenses, cash flow, that sort of thing. So if you're starting brand new and you don't have any bookings, you didn't take anything over, and you didn't do any pre-bookings because this was somebody else's venue, or maybe you're converting a building into a venue, that sort of thing, then, let me back up. If you are still in the process, let's say it's an old building of yours that you want to convert, get a timeline and start pre-booking. So once you know when it's going to be ready, but caveat here, you have to know when it's going to be ready. If you don't know that, you could get into big trouble by booking somebody into your event, into your venue, and it not being ready. So be certain that it's going to be ready. But you can start pre-booking those events and start getting cash in while you are still building, which normally with building loans, there's a little bit of leeway with banks in terms of the payback period, because they know that you're not going to be generating any money until the structure is complete. And that is a good way for you to get ahead of the game while you are still in the building phase. But you might think, but wait, Kyle, what if I'm buying an existing venue that just has, 1 to 5 bookings on the calendar? What do I do? And it's really, that's a great question, and I can answer that more precisely because I lived that. And so we went into it without any knowledge or any direct industry knowledge, and so the learning curve was steep on our first one. And the big takeaway that I had from that one is, if I could have started pre-booking, if I had thought about it, you're under contract, you just got to work it out with the seller, and not just work it out with them, but also have the wherewithal to do the tours and do the bookings, and you have to be set up to manage all of that. Because likely they're selling, they stopped marketing, they stopped really caring about doing any of the setup and outreach and that sort of thing, if they're the owner and operator of the business. So the effort that you have to put in to get all of that ramped up, it could take the entire time that you are working on closing the deal. So the risk there is, if the deal falls through and you put all this time, effort, and money into marketing and all that, just for it to fall through. So there is a note of precaution there on doing pre-sales before you actually close. So that might sound too risky for you, and we certainly didn't do that. What we did instead, when we talked with the bank, we said, look, this venue has this much potential. We did our business plan, did our market research. We showed that there is good potential in the market. It was already in existence. They had been doing okay, not great, but okay. And we showed our plan for how to make it better. With that, we said, we know that we won't be able to start making money right away because we have to basically start from zero. We are also doing a facelift. We need to improve some of the aesthetics of the property. So in our loan, we got a loan to improve the aesthetics, and we were able to work out to where we had no payments for, I can't remember how many months, and then interest-only payments for, I also can't remember how many months, but those are negotiable terms. negotiate those terms with the bank. You have to be prepared for that. The other thing that we had in our bank or in our loan was working capital, and that was because in the wedding venue industry, to get started, you don't get all the money up front. You get a deposit, and then at some point in the future, you will start to receive the rest of that money until your cutoff date for the event. So we weren't receiving everything all at once when we booked an event. So we used working capital to help us cover our bills, pay for the marketing, pay for all this stuff, and make sure that we were able to operate until we got to a positive cash flow. Thing of note with the cash flow, don't expect cash to flow if you don't have any bookings that you've taken over. Great, if you have 10 or less bookings on the calendar, don't expect to be cash flowing for about a year. And you can play around with that and possibly make it sooner, depending on how you collect your deposits, depending on how you handle payment plans and things like that with your potential clients. How we had it set up, we saw it happen in about 12 months. And so we have a 50% deposit, and then the rest is due at within 90 days, or sorry, at or before 90 days of their event. So from that, we just knew that we had to build up the base layer of payments coming in, and that took about a year. Now, if you have like our second one where you have a number of events on the books already, great for you. That's a great place to start. I would say that having them already in existence, there are other challenges that come with that, but the money situation gets a lot easier. And as long as you have good staff in place and that sort of thing, then you're going to be cash flowing potentially right off the bat. That's the ideal. And that's if they were running it properly. And if they haven't been, and they've only been doing sporadic bursts of bookings and the staff in place is not the best fit, you ought to do your due diligence on that. I've talked about that in a previous episode where I wish, or I guess I can't wish because I didn't know really, but the lessons that we learned from buying our second one, I can't remember which episode it is, but listen to that one about the lessons we learned from that. And the key takeaway was make sure you interview the staff and know what you're looking for to avoid having to basically reset your venue because of the damage that they were doing. And that's really an important piece of that. But if you're taking over in terms of financials, if they're already getting bookings, the staff is good, and it's just really a smooth transition of a healthy business, then you should be cash flowing already. Or if you're not, you're really close. And so that one is hard to tell with ours because of the staffing issue and that sort of thing. We didn't start cash flowing for about 5 or 6 months, which is pretty decent to be fair, but it would have been better had we not had the staffing issues that we did. So as far as cash flow goes, that's what to expect. And then in terms of maintenance, depending on where you're located, if you're on your own septic, then expect the septic to back up and get tampons and plastic clips that are hanging on your toilet that get knocked into the bowl and flush down and jam up your grinder and cause everything to back up into the kitchen. And don't ask me how I know this 2 weeks in a row and more before that, because it's going to happen. So be prepared for the sporadic emergency call to the plumber if you're on septic. If you're on city, I couldn't answer that as much because I'm not. But I imagine that you have some other issues as well. So keep in mind those sporadic emergency calls. And do you have a dirt road? If you do, how often do you need to get it graded and remove the potholes and everything like that? Especially if you're in a rainy situation, a rainy location, or if you have a paved paved road. How often do you get potholes? A pothole is a pothole. They happen whether your road is paved or dirt. And so you should be prepared for that. Maintenance, general maintenance. How big is your property? How many AC units do you have? How often do those get fixed? Pest control. That's very important. These are all expenses that come out. Do you have a dishwasher? The monthly dishwashing cost. What else is there? Those are pretty standard monthly expenses. And then you have your marketing, which is a must. People need to know that you exist. And just posting on Facebook and not having anything else going for you is not a good way to let people know that you exist and that you're a good option. So you have marketing services, you have ad expense. Um, that could be $1,000 to $4,000 a month. Just depends on you and your market and how much business you want to get. And then there's accounting fees like back end clerical work, that sort of thing. So there's a lot to consider aside from just the mortgage and the utilities. Do you have internet? Is the internet good? Do you have security cameras? Do you have what else? I can't give an exhaustive list just because it's not right in front of me, but also because there are so many different things that are situational dependent and venue dependent. But that should give you a good starting point of things to be prepared for. And then there's the cost to fulfill. So flipping a room, cleaning, and like I mentioned in the previous episode, or the last episode, the dishwashing or staffing, that sort of thing, bartenders, security, all of that. Those are all additional expenses that are variable depending on the events and how many events and that sort of thing. But across the board, I see an average of about $1,000 to $1,500 an expense when you have an event. So take $1,000 off of whatever it is that you charge, and that's what you're left with for all of your fixed expenses and take home profit. So I hope that gave you a good idea of what to expect. If you found this useful, please subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.